Hola, buenos días. Buenos días para algunos, buenas
Good
tardes.
morning, good afternoon. Finally, after many months of work, we are here today in this first meeting. I hope it's the first of many meetings, Latin American events, including the Caribbean, so that we can have a conversation among authors and organizations of authors.
I am very happy to be here today. So many months of hard work. This session will be translated into language, Spanish and English. So for those who prefer use it, you will find the option at the bottom of your screen. And we recommend here only the translated language and muting the original audio. Bueno, creo que no es necesario que lo repita en español.
I think it's not necessary for me to repeat it in Spanish. There's an option. If you wish to use the interpretation, you can choose the option in your screen to use simultaneous interpretation. I want to remind you that this event will be recorded, so please mute your microphones so we don't have any interferences.
We remind that this session will be recorded, so please close your microphones. If someone wishes to ask a question, they can use the option Q&A that is in the bottom of the screen. And please use your name and also indicate the person who they wish to answer the question. Abajo en nuestras pantallas está la opción de preguntas y respuestas. Les pido
In our screens, you can see the Q&A option. So if you have a question after each panel, you can use that option, and please write the name of the person you are asking the question to. Depending on the number of questions and the available time, we will try to answer all of them.
All. Dicho lo cual, me complace.
Having said this, I'm pleased to welcome John Diggin.
I want to welcome John. He's the chair of IAF.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here. As I said in the beginning, it's nice to have you here in the other side of our continent.
Thank you, Fernanda.
To hear you and that you hear us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you again.
Entonces, le cedo la palabra a John.
Yeah. It's wonderful to see you again. I think about our long drive in Mexico very often. Katie and Barbara were there, so they know what I'm talking about. So, hola, everyone. As Fernanda said, I'm John Deegan. I'm chair of the International Authors Forum. I'm also executive director of the Writers Union of Canada, and that's where I'm speaking to you from right now, from Toronto. Of course, I wish we could all be somewhere fabulous together in the same room for this discussion, but this is our new reality for now, and better thoughts for the future. So we've had a very busy 2020 at the IAF, making sure that authors are present in the rooms where our rights are being discussed and debated. We did that just last week at the Intellectual Property Organization in Geneva during their copyright meetings. Specific to Latin America, the IAF is helping author organizations put together online events like this, discussing author issues. Some future events will be looking at author issues in Belize and copyright protection in Mexico, ebooks and technology, along with the distribution of ebooks. The IAF will work to help author organizations in Latin America further develop and contribute in fruitful debate to tackle their unique issues and problems. We want to act as a kind of a convener to bring together organizations across Latin America to enhance professional and personal relationships. Another goal is to have an event during the Guadalajara Book Fair in 2021, if possible, and to utilize the appointment of Guadalajara as the 2022 World Book Capital to establish a plan of actions to engage with even more authors and author organizations across the region. Finally, in this past year, we've been making a special push to highlight the importance of public lending rights systems worldwide. So obviously, we would like to see PLR systems take hold throughout this region as well. I really, really look forward to today's discussion. I'm thrilled to see all of you here in the spare bedroom of my house in Toronto. It's amazing what technology can do. And now I'll hand it back to Fernanda.
Thank you, John. Obviously, we need to work together. And of course, Guadalajara would be a nice place for the kickoff. Now we are going to start with the first panel. Gracias a todos por estar aquí. Empezaremos con nuestro primer panel.
Thank you for being here. Now we will start with our first panel, and I will give the floor Katie Webb. You know her well because we have worked all year long in different meetings. Katie will explain the vision and the goals. Go ahead, Katie.
Hello, thank you, Fer, and good evening, everybody. Good evening from where I am, but good morning, good afternoon. I know that we're coming together across many different time zones today, and I just wanted to start by thanking Maria Fernanda Mendoza for her work, which, well, first of all, starting with the event she organised for us in Puebla in 2015, at which point we really didn't have a clue how to engage with authors or authors organisations in Latin America. But thanks to her persistence, we've carried on for the last 5 years. And so it's really amazing that we've got to this point today where we really feel like, I think we're building momentum, and that we're here together to talk about these issues, to listen to you, to hear from you what's going on in the continent, and to really start working on something very exciting. So I also wanted to announce just a little update to John's mention of Guadalajara. We actually are going to be present digitally at this year's Guadalajara. So along with Fer and our other teammates who you'll hear from later, Jorge Comensal, Carlos Winter and Feline Cayetano, they're going to be appearing in a virtual panel in Guadalajara on the 2nd of December. So we're very happy about that. And today I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about the history of the International Authors Forum, what it is, why it started, and what we'd like to do. The International Authors Forum began in 2009 as a wish by a small group of organisations representing authors in different countries to have more independent representation for the rights of authors at the global level. And in 2013, we became officially recognised as an organisation. And now we have around 70 members all over the world. And just to clarify, by author, We mean author in the copyright sense of the word. So whereas author is often used to mean writer in common parlance, or at least in English, in the copyright definition, it means anyone who is making a living from their creative expression in different mediums, so many of which are represented here today, whether you're a writer, a translator, an illustrator, a script writer, a composer. But the people working to create the basis and who have the copyright in the original works that they produce. And we wanted in particular to have this independent representation for authors at WIPO, which John has already mentioned, the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is the UN body, the United Nations body that governs the international copyright framework. At that forum, nearly 200 of the world's governments meet to discuss your rights, and they all have different agendas depending on the different policies and aims of their countries, as well as the government speaking and deciding upon this copyright framework. There are also NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who are allowed to speak, and those include representatives of publishers, libraries, the educational sector, movie producers, all of whom have an interest and work with copyright works, the works of authors. But at the point at which the International Authors Forum was formed, there was no body that specifically represented and gave a voice to authors. So we go to the meetings in Geneva and we explain how the proposed changes that governments want to make to copyright are going to affect authors' rights and ultimately their ability to make a living, to be recognised and paid fairly for their works. And in doing this, we try to consult, wherever possible, we try to bring authors with us, but we always work in consultation with authors and really try to have as much input from authors as possible. And that's why it's so important in also calling ourselves truly international, that we represent as many of the voices of authors as possible. And so having you all here and on board today and welcoming you into the International Authors Forum is really important to what we're trying to do, which we hope also is what you're all already doing to a certain extent, and that we're bringing that to the global level. We also work to improve contract terms for authors. So obviously in the global and digital environment in which we live, it's not easy to make a living as an author. We live in a world very much in which it's assumed that a lot of creative work we can get for free, we can download off the internet, we can, there's not really a consciousness in society often that actually paying for authors' work might be of benefit because it will sustain the author and enable them to keep on creating that work. So even to get a contract is difficult, as I'm sure many of you know, for an author these days, let alone to know what a fair contract means, often presented with legalese, terms with which they're not familiar. And whilst in many countries, authors' organisations and unions do a brilliant job of giving advice about contracts to authors so they know what a fair contract is and what to look for. Obviously, this isn't something that's available worldwide. So we did a piece of research as the International Authors Forum where we formed a working group and we brought together different perspectives, different experiences. We identified the problem areas in contracts all over the world, and we brought this together into a resource called 10 Principles for Fair Contracts, which many of you have already seen. And I know many of you in Latin America are in accord with this, which is really aims to be a guide for authors to be able to know what is fair, what's not fair, to hopefully give them some strength in negotiating against what's often quite an intimidating organisation, and feeling more confident in asking for a fair contract personally, as well as to be a lobbying tool. So we also campaign with this so that we can really speak with one voice and be stronger together to try and get publishers to listen and to perhaps think about how they can make their contracts fairer for authors, albeit acknowledging that it's a very difficult market in the current times that we live. And so the third thing we do, which covers all of the above really, is copyright education and awareness. And that can be at any level, whether it's educating governments about the perspective of authors and how the decisions they make might affect authors adversely or to their benefit, whether it's educating authors themselves. As we've said, copyright could be quite a complicated thing. We're not born with an innate knowledge of it. So actually telling authors about their rights is a great way to help them to make a living from their work and to really bring their work up to a professional level to do more of it. And also users, whether that's the everyman going on the computer and downloading from YouTube, or whether that's the big multinational platforms like Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook, who at the moment are very important in the copyright debate, and how copyright deals with them is very important in respect to their responsibility, their liability for the enormous amounts of content that they make available for free when they themselves make huge profits from advertising revenues. But of course, I think what is really, really important about what we do is to bring authors together, to create this solidarity, to create a network, and to talk to each other, to listen to each other, because what we're ultimately aiming to do is to protect the global, the cultural and linguistic diversity that gives us so much strength as a human planet. So having all your voices, all the cultures, all the countries, all the identities that you represent here today is really, really key to our work. So I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm really interested to hear what you've all got to say. Thank you. Thank you, Fernanda.
Muchas gracias, Katy. Y efectivamente de 5 años para
Thank you,
acá.
Katie. And effectively, in the last 5 years, we have a different scenario. And I don't want to be pessimistic, but I think that in many areas, things are not better for authors in this new digital era. So we need to work together to find new strategies that will help us strengthen copyright in the region. And I think that the work of IAF, it's very important to be able to achieve together better conditions for creators. Thank you, Katie.
I'm going to give the floor to Luke. Hi, Luke. Welcome to this meeting.
Hi, thank you, Fernanda, and thank you for bringing us together here today. So I'd like to talk about the Creating a Living report, which was a piece of research undertaken by IAF with support from the international author community to better understand the challenges that authors face and how we can support them. So it's important that authors are able to make a living from their work in every country so that they can continue to create and so that everywhere people can enjoy rich and vibrant culture. To understand authors' earnings, we reviewed studies on authors' incomes from as many countries as possible. Looking at studies and surveys that have taken place around the world, we found evidence that authors' incomes are in decline around the world, unfortunately. In our report, examples of this included the fact that in the UK, despite a continued growth in the creative industries there, average earnings had fallen for writers by 42% over a 12-year period. Also in the UK for visual artists, a study found that on average, an artist only earned £5,000, which in the UK is considered less than a third of what is necessary for an acceptable standard of living for a person. In the United States, there was also a 42% decline between 2009 to 2017, a very severe drop. In France, it was found that only 8% of authors earn above their national minimum wage. In Italy, a study reported that 96% of writers were unable to make a living from the revenues from writing alone. In Canada, it was found that writers in 2018 were making 78% less than they had in 1998. So that's nearly an 80% decline over about 20 years. Alongside evidence of these falling incomes for authors, there is also evidence that declining incomes would prevent a wide range of authors from creating, which makes these declines in incomes very concerning. There are a lot of gaps in the information available, as it takes a lot of resources to research authors' incomes and develop studies that reveal their situation. But overall, the trend is clear. Around the world, authors have seen a significant decline in earnings over previous years. A significant concern is that while authors' incomes are in decline in many countries, this challenge is very significant in countries that do not already have a well-funded creative industries. We saw from testimonials and interviews that in many countries, poor protection for authors' works is a barrier to them creating work at all. Given a wide range of evidence of challenges for earnings, we put together suggestions from various authors' organizations for measures that could be established to help support authors in every country. First, there are various kinds of remuneration rights that could be established. For artists, we campaign for the artist resale right. This is where, as the name suggests, artists have a right to some income from the resale of their artwork after it has first been sold. This would typically apply to limited productions of art, such as paintings or limited prints or sculptures. Resale right challenges the fact that artists are often not remunerated for the continued enjoyment of their work in the same way that authors of mass media would be. It's a fair reward for artists when the value of their work is often only seen after it has been sold. This right is also important where an artist's work can be resold very far away from their community, which is why we campaign for a global spread of the resale right, so that the international arts market can pay back to artists wherever they are in the world. For all authors, the public lending right is very important, as it can pay authors for the use of their work in libraries without a cost to the reader or the library. And public lending right is greatly valuable to authors because it gives them an ongoing connection to readers, but also the remuneration from it can be the seed of an author's next work, their next book or anything they write. And it can be a way for governments to support writing in local languages, because we see in some examples that governments will establish a PLR scheme, which specifically encourages authors to write in local languages where they need more support for their national publishing. Authors also need to be sure that they're paid for the use of their work online. While the works of authors across the world are now being accessed online more than ever before, creators are not always fairly remunerated for such uses. Authors need remuneration rights that reflect how their work is used online, and a right or an unwaivable right to remuneration for online uses could ensure that authors are properly paid when their works are used, for example, on streaming services, such as Netflix. But in addition to authors' remuneration rights, there's a lot of other ways that we can support authors. A major benefit for authors is always having an authors organization in their country, because authors organizations can foster their professional development, they can create opportunities for them to work, and they support their rights. Authors are typically not the best resourced group in their industry. They're very often the weak partner in bargaining with a publisher or a producer. But societies and unions offer a voice to authors, whether it's in cultural policy, speaking to government, or whether it's in professional support with copyright and contract education. Copyrights and contracts have a major effect on an author's work. So industries should have some kind of best practice established, some minimum standards of contracts to support authors. And very often it's authors' organizations and unions that are engaged in setting these standards. So we hope that this report is a first step towards more work to understand and improve the situation of authors around the world. Some of the measures I discussed, including resale, lending and remuneration rights, along with copyright and contract education and authors' organizations, all contribute towards improving authors' earnings. I hope that we can work with many authors' organizations to help campaign on these issues so that authors can continue to make a living from their work and continue to create culture. Thank you.
And thank you, Luke. Después de escucharte, confirmo que no
After hearing you, I confirm that we were not wrong when we said that we are so concerned because of this situation, because the situation is worrisome. And I would like to give you some context regarding the situation in Latin America after what Cari said and what Luke said. Why are we here today? I would like to let you know why we are here, or for what we are here today in this first meeting. I would like to talk the situation of copyright in Latin America. There are several things. First, I would like to talk about legislation. In most of our countries, legislation is not enough. We are still in an analog world. There is no regulation for creative content and works in the digital environment. And leaving the digital part aside, in many countries, for example, we have specifically the case of Mexico. One of the things that that strikes me the most is the lack of recognition of interpreters and translators regarding their rights. The most regulated contract is publishing contracts, but everything that has to do with photographers is not taken into consideration. And in all legislations, we will find gaps. We will find spaces in which we need legislators to modify. We need them to correct those failures. Because we need for authors to have new opportunity windows to exercise their rights in this new digital era or age. A few years ago, I was talking to a librarian, and she told me that her friends asked her what her husband did, and she said that her husband was a writer, but their friends asked her from what he lived, and that is evidence of the lack of value given to artwork and intellectual work. Another thing that I would like to mention is the situation of copyright offices in our countries. Most of these offices depend on the ministries of culture or education, or what's worse, sometimes they depend on the economy ministry. So they are kind of the poor family member when compared with industrial property offices that deal with patents. So what is happening with copyright officers in government? Usually they'll have budget and they don't have staff. And that prevents them from providing services to the authors community. Usually everything that has to do with a register works better, but everything that has to do with the defense of authors, with training, and also with awareness campaigns, all that is being ignored because they don't have the resources to carry out all these actions. And this leads to the lack of interest that governments have regarding the importance of copyright and with relation to the huge contribution that authors make to society. This year, we wouldn't have been able to survive to confinement, but for authors, but for audiovisual works, but for books, but for music. So we have a great debt with authors, and the government also have that debt. And sometimes they are the first to ignore this. For example, for cultural events, they hire the platforms, the lighting, screens, but authors sometimes need to give away their work. Musicians have to give away their work. Plates need to be free, and that is very unfair. Any public official gives away their salary because it's just a cultural event. So why authors have to do this? And this has to do with lack of public policies to protect authors and creators. As Luke said it, it's important to take into consideration the relationship of authors and creators and cultural industries. Usually authors are the weakest part. Sometimes we don't have even contracts, and illustrators know about this. Polly wouldn't let me lie. Many illustrators are always under informal agreements, and they are not well treated. Regarding translators, there are no contracts, or the contracts are very unfair. So that's why I think it's very interesting to listen to the proposal of IAF regarding the 10 principles that should be included in contracts to have fair bargaining conditions. We need to work so that this is included in our legislation. That is the floor. But we need to make sure that those 10 principles are included in our contracts. That is the starting point. I would like to show you a map that we prepared for this meeting. Just a minute. I'm sharing my screen. I would like to show you this map. We are a region rich in terms of diversity and the production of cultural goods. We can boast stuff, but authors do not enjoy this. They cannot live of their work with dignity. And why is this? And among other reasons that I have found, and I'm sure that Luke with his research is able to confirm this, one of the reasons is that authors are not aware of the fact that they are authors. University professors that write books do not consider themselves as authors. They believe that they are professors that have the gift of writing, but they do not consider themselves as authors because they live out of the salary that they receive from universities. So this part of feeling like authors is being ignored. Those who know that are authors are not aware of their rights, what they can demand, how they can demand things. So there we have a gap. So there we have opportunity to have predatory behaviors against authors. Organization isn't required, but also we need international cooperation. We need to know what is happening in other parts of the world. We need to work together. We are seeing that there are good practices in other regions and we should copy them. If you pay attention to this map, you'll see that there are many spaces where we can work. What are we going to do with Central America, for example? There is a great creative production out there. Carlos and Felin will talk about this. However, there are no organizations of authors. So I think that the country that has a bigger culture regarding authors organizations is Argentina, with 3 organizations. Then we have CMOs, but in other parts of the region, we are not having a good representation. We need to work together. We need to maximize the role of IAF so that the voices of Latin American authors is listened to internationally, and so that it reverberates in our governments. As we are not experts in our own lands, we need to go out in order to be able to return. We need to have synergies. We have to build a great network in order to be able to work together. That is the starting point. And from now on, I think that things will be easier if we work together. That is what I would like to say. And now I will open this space for anyone who has questions or comments on anybody from the audience or the public, or any of the presenters, or myself, or Katie, or Barbara. We welcome your questions. So please state who you want to ask a question, please.
No questions then? Any comments?
I saw there was one question that I answered with text to see a copy of the report, but I'll paste it in the chat as well.
Perfecto. Entonces, bueno, pues
That's perfect. Then let's move forward with this session.